Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting. Today is June 4th, 2024. We do have a need for a closed executive session, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we, on June 4th, 2024, the board go into closed session to discuss, first, the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. 2, pending or reasonably imminent litigation. 3, collective bargaining. And 4, the purchase, exchange, sale, or lease of real property.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Excellent. That motion carries. We'll go ahead and prepare the room, and we'll reconvene at 5:30. Thank you.
Yes, please.
While we're waiting,
Actually, just this,
I
after
have
this
a
one, right?
recommendation for you guys on Hulu, if you have Hulu. If you haven't watched We Were the Lucky Ones.
Oh, cool.
It's called We Were the Lucky.
And you feel kind of helpless. Oh, I was going to go out, but then I thought I can't go out.
Did send you a thumbs up yet? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience, as we did need to take a little extra time in our closed session, and of course to get the board meeting set up to reconvene the public portion of our agenda this evening. As earlier stated, today is June 4th, 2024. We are here for the purposes of a Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting. I certainly want to take a minute to welcome you all, and of course to recognize our association presidents who are with us this evening or joining us remotely. For the Classified Association Presidents, Buildings and Grounds, we have President Elio Campo. For Child Nutrition, we have President Tanya Slaughter. Transportation, President Chris Krogh. For Salt Lake Education Association, we have President James Tobler and Vice President Mike Harmon. Thank you for being here as always. And then for SLCSD, the Salt Lake Association of School Administrators, President Bree DeLeon is represented, and SLCSD is represented tonight by Dallin Miller. Dallin, thank you for joining us, and congratulations on the end of a new school year to everybody that I just mentioned as well. Thank you for all of that. I also want to acknowledge that Board Member Bade is joining us remotely, but he is there. Hello, Mohammed. Thank you for being here tonight as well. Up next, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Vice President Williams.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in the pledge and for being here with us this evening. The first recognition on our list is really exciting to me. Last year I had the opportunity to read all the list of retired folks that are retiring this year from Salt Lake City School District. So I definitely want to honor and recognize everybody for their commitment and their years of service to Salt Lake City School District, which is really, really exciting. Even just looking at the number of years of service accumulated here among all the folks that I will read out loud, it's well over 300 years of service as I read that, which is a remarkable commitment on behalf of all these individuals to the students of Salt Lake and to our community at large. So I'll go ahead and start reading this list. It's a long one, so hopefully if I don't mispronounce anybody's names, if I do, I'm super, super sorry. So for our classified retirees, we had Jeffrey Brimley. We have Filogino Pile Chavez. We have Janet Benton. We have Jesse Garcia. Vaughn Call. For our non-contracted employees, we have Carrie Christopherson Jank and Anna Lowry. And then for our certified retirees, who makes up the rest of our list here, we have Deborah Clough, who was the principal at Highland Park. We have Randall Miller, who was also a principal at Franklin. We have Timothy Porter, who was the assistant principal at Highland. For counselors, we have Timothy Porter, Carrie Fifield, excuse me, Gregory Forbush, Debbie Rocha. Hi, Debbie. She was actually my first boss when I moved back to Salt Lake after college. We have John Valentine, and we also have Regina Williams. For a librarian from Dilworth, we have Rochelle Park. And then, of course, our teachers round out the rest of this list with Pamela Capson, Patricia Christensen, Randy Coombs, Kimberly Gianello, Pamela Gonzalez, George Haynes, Aaron Hall, Daphne Merchant, Pearline Ninau, Richard Spencer, Kathy Stringham, Lisa Bendel, Lori Bergen, Valerie Balmiris, Wendy Child, Michael Crickwellian, sorry if I got that wrong, Michael, Nikki Dinas, Leslie Edwards, Ivy Falloner, Monica French, Yvette Kirk-Stone, Chi-Ying Lewis, Teresa McIntosh, Tina Masaka, Corey Norton, Mary Lou Oland Wong, Mirosalva Salas Monful, Cherry Sorensen, and Catherine Wolf. Can we give a round of applause to all of our retirees? Again, we can't thank you enough for your years of service. As I mentioned, the cumulative years, I should have added all those up. But nonetheless, it's an extensive amount of years and a commitment to our Salt Lake City School District. Superintendent Grant, anything you'd like to say about our retirees this year?
Just the that cumulative gift to have served Salt Lake City school children for so many years is pretty remarkable, and to have been with it that long with a lot of changes in the teaching profession and the expectations of schools and the role that they play in society, just to have so many people who have served our district for so long, I think is quite remarkable. In fact, one of them is going to be noticed in our next section on the recognitions as well. So we're losing some real talent, and just a huge appreciation to those who have given so much to the children in our district.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Our next recognition is the Presidential Award of Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching finalist. I'll invite up Dr. Tiffany Hall to go ahead and lead us in that recognition.
Well, I am very proud to talk about the Presidential Award for Excellence in the Teaching of Mathematics and Science. But the honoree or the participant, Mary Olong Wong from Emerson Elementary School, is not here tonight. And Candace Penrod, who had a wonderful presentation, she is off on a research trip, finishing some things. But Mary has retired, and so she isn't able to be with us here tonight. But as we have discussed, our district tends to have a lot of people that are nominated for this award. It is a very prestigious award, and we tend to win it very often. So we will no doubt hear if Mary is awarded the award, and if she does, then she'll still be able to go back to Washington, D.C. and be recognized there. But at this time, I think we could all just send her our best thoughts to the universe, that they will recognize her for the talents and abilities that she has. She has been an amazing teacher. She's been a teacher in the ELP and the DLI program at Emerson, and I have watched her teach math, and she is truly amazing. So we'll just hope that she becomes a winner and that we're able to come back, and hopefully we'll be able, if she wins, we'll be able to come back and have this recognition in person. So
we'll just assume that she's not quite done with our district yet.
yes, I think she's still got a toe in, and I'll take any piece of her I can get. She's amazing.
If
So
I can add to that, she wasn't able to come today, but said she would like to share some credit on even getting this far in this with the science coaches in our district who have made a difference for her in the quality of instruction, and with others, that she really lauds the work that the science coaches in particular have done across the district. So I wanted to throw that in, part of Tiffany's team that way, that deserves some credit as well in this.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Thank you, Superintendent.
Yeah.
Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I can do that. I move that we approve the consent agenda as posted.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Any discussion to the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Jenny Sika.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Excellent. That motion carries. And moving on to our next agenda item, which is our request to speak. We do have one speaker this evening, but of course, the board has asked me to read some guidelines regarding public comment. The board enjoys the opportunity to hear from the public during the comment portion of its meetings. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to remind you of our board rules governing your comments. 1, the total time reserved for public comment is not to exceed 15 minutes, with all speakers or groups limited to 3 minutes. The board will not allow public comments during board meetings that are slanderous, obscene, or otherwise violate state or federal law. Employees and/or their representatives may not use the public comment period to address issues that should be raised through existing formal communication channels or established grievance or negotiations procedures. I'd also like to explain that unless the speaker's topic is already on the agenda, state law prohibits the board from taking action on items raised during the public comment period. However, if it seems appropriate to the circumstances, I may direct district staff to follow up with the speaker on the topic discussed. Our first speaker this evening, and I'm not going to pronounce this name right, I already know it, Al Kranika? Is Al here this evening? All right. Well, seeing that they're not here, I don't know, board, if Al does show up, do you want to take that time during the meeting to go ahead and hear from them and what they have to say?
Sure.
Perfect. All right. So Al, if you're watching, getting here in the car, we'll got some time for you. Moving on to our reports agenda, Superintendent, I believe the first item is yours to report on. School closure and boundary adjustment transition activities update.
So we've ended the school year, and this will be my last official update on the transition, though certainly issues related to transitions and things will come up again as we start the new school year. But just to close out with a couple of updates on this, there were a number of closing activities at the 4 elementary schools that are closing, and again, I just want to thank the community and the staff of those schools for putting those on, celebrating those. You'll find in your packet one of the ways that they celebrated. You have copies of these, were pictures of the student body in front of the schools, and the students each got a copy of those pictures. But there were also other celebrations with alumni and with members of the community in those schools, and I just want to thank our community for pulling those together to honor those schools. As I've mentioned before, as we're going forward, we are placing district personnel inside the buildings so that they will be used, and they will be, so the public will see that they're used also, so that people don't decide to go in them unaccompanied and all. And so that they stay clean and cared for as we make future determinations about the buildings. The other piece about this is the property around the buildings. We like to keep the property available and useful to the community so that they can come and play on the equipment or use the fields But just a reminder to the community that those are restricted by covenants that say you don't let your dogs run free too much, and that, I mean, these are still for public use. As long as those are still for public use, we want to keep them available to the public. It's very hard for us to close them off. We don't have fencing around those spots, but we do also want to make sure that they're well used and are available to everybody in the neighborhoods that want to use the fields and the equipment in this transition time. So that's it for me, unless there's questions.
All right, seeing no questions at this time, thank you, Dr. Grant.
You're welcome.
For bringing that to us. Item number 2 on our reports agenda this evening is the Inclusive Schools Resolution Annual Report. Superintendent, will you please introduce us?
Sure. Erin Anderson, our Director of Special Education, has pulled this together. Just a reminder of this. This is just the inclusion report. There are some questions that I think we may have as a board that we could raise for future board meetings if we wanted to get additional data on the academic outcomes of different programs and things. We can do that, but most of this is just replying to the resolution itself and providing that update. So please let us know what other things you'd like in future meetings, and we can pull that together. Erin, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Sam's working on it. Is this mine to use? Yes. Okay. So while Sam works on it, and I just have a quick intro, and thank you, Dr. Grant, for helping lead into this. In 2020, the board signed the resolution, Inclusive Resolution Agreement. That is, it's a systemic, inclusive topic. So it's not just for students with that are neurodiverse or have IEPs, but it really does dig deeper into the idea that no two learners in our community are alike, and we want equitable outcomes for all of our students. So as we look forward to this, and as you see through the presentation, I will be talking about this in a number of areas, but I just want to remind you that this is the 4th year that I've had the opportunity to report on this, and I'm super excited that we get to do this every year. And as such, as I do this, we talk about ways we've improved in areas that we've done. We are going to focus on, because the inclusion resolution focuses on the academic piece, the social emotional piece, the physical inclusion, and then we're also going to look at school community and this idea, or the idea in the resolution of equitable future for all our students. Thanks, Sam. Again, when I talk about students, I know I'm the Director of Special Education, but I like to think of all of our students as gen ed students first. So I will try and be really clear in whom I'm talking about. And then, again, as I talk about this, I do want to talk a little bit about this idea of continuum of services. It's the idea that we have general education for all our students, and then we offer services based on need as we go along, and sometimes those services are more for some students and less for others, and they can vary for children throughout the day. So I'll kind of talk about continuum potentially here and there as we go through, and I just want to be really clear that as I talk about that, again, it's the idea that we're adding or giving the services that the student needs, and we've kind of added some pieces that I'm super excited about. And then also part of this, which is super exciting, is I'm going to do some highlights of staff kind of along the way instead of at the end. Last year I did at the end, but this year I'm going to do it along the way. As I already indicated, one of the areas that we're going to quickly talk about is this idea of academic inclusion in preschool. We have had an inclusive preschool prior to my tenure. Shelley Haverson has had it and started it, well, not started it, but made sure it was more inclusive than it had previously been. So it's about 10 years or more that we've had this idea of inclusive preschool. As we look at this, we talk about the ideas this year. We have added some more sites with differing levels of supports. Again, the idea that we're providing supports for students for the levels that they need. So we have added Newman as a site this school year. It has been an awesome opportunity to allow for students to have more of their pre-K teacher teach them, and then the special ed teacher comes and goes versus a collaborative or a co-taught class the entire time. And so this idea again of expanding the continuum, we're adding into our service model so that we're providing more opportunities for students to get exactly what they need. One thing I wanted to highlight for data, the piece of, because we're talking about this idea of opportunities for inclusion. 75% of our students that have been identified and are eligible for IEPs are in a classroom that is taught with a EC teacher, our early childhood teacher, and then like I said, they'll have some sort of services. It might be a co-taught classroom, it might be a teacher who comes and goes. We call those supported classrooms. And so that's huge. 75% of our students with IEPs have that. The other 25% are in a special class, but they still are having opportunities to access their peers throughout the school day, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation with how we're doing this. I do want a huge shout out. I have worked hard with Dr. Tiffany Hall's department, Miss Audrey Powell. She's our EC supervisor, and collaborating to find locations to work with her team. We've done some professional development together with my teachers and her teachers, and then just shout out to the preschool special ed teachers who have really encompassed this and taken this and run with it. They're an awesome group to work with. I do want to make a little note because this data is slightly different than some state reported data because I didn't include our students. We have a few students who only get speech who've opted out of preschool altogether. And because they're not even accessing preschool, I did not include them in this data. So I just want to be transparent about that. Here we go. So now we're going to move on to our students who are kindergarten, and I say K plus or 12 plus because we have students who are in post high, so they're 18, 19, 20, we've talked about VIP and SCORE, and I'm going to talk about it again tonight. So they're continued to be counted in all of our special ed data as we look at some things and as we talk about supports that we provide. But I want to be really, again, clear that as we talk about these opportunities with their gen ed peers, how this data is reflected or how the state requires us to report it is based on who's teaching the class. And so when we look at our number one data point of 65% of students who have IEPs, they spend 80% or more of their day with their gen ed peers, that's really this idea that it's being taught either solely by a gen ed teacher, co-taught with a special ed and gen ed teacher, or having supports with a para, something like that. And so at the high school or even at the middle school level, depending on your period system, if you're a block period, that's 3 or 4 periods of your 4-period day. At the elementary level, that's about an hour that you're not with your peers that you might be giving individualized services that you need. And that's huge. 65% of our students are accessing the majority, if not all, and it could be all of their day. The next bullet point is our middle group, the 40% to 79%. Again, as I said, this is how many minutes they're being taught by a teacher who is a licensed general education teacher. At the secondary level, that same kind of idea of block periods, 2 to 3 periods a day. At the elementary level, we're looking at minutes, we're looking at hours in a day. So they may have a little bit more services, so they might be pulled out for more than an hour on average. And again, these are averages because the model that we use, the mathematical system, averages time that students are with their peers, and that's how it's reported to the state. The last number includes our post-secondary programming and is a little bit misleading or misrepresenting in how we have to report it to the state, because when we have students in VIP and SCORE, they are always taught by a special ed teacher. We don't have a gen ed teacher who teaches post-high in our programming, and so they're always counted in that number. So I just want to be transparent that 40% of their school day with their gen ed peers, that's that core teacher teaching them. And so that's the little bullet underneath, or the parenthetical underneath, this idea that in our post-second programming, they're all there. We don't have an option to really identify what their class may have looked like in high school And as I'm going to talk about again in some future slides, this does not mean they're not accessing their gen ed peers. We have peer tutors who are pushing in, but they're being taught by a special ed teacher because that is what is needed by their IEP. And then the last little bullet on this, I wanted to highlight because I think this is really an important thing to talk about or to consider. We have about 2,500 students with IEPs in our district, and 8% of those students are accessing what we call the dynamic learning map core, which is characterized within that those students who are needing majority of their support in special ed. So they have to get their core from a licensed special ed teacher. So I just wanted to identify that, but also shout out that we're working really hard to decrease those numbers of students who are accessing the dynamic learning map core, but also that 18%, like we are working consistently, and we'll talk about some of the professional development we're doing to make sure that when we write IEPs, when we're providing services, it's really happening in that least restrictive setting, that least restrictive environment, and that they're still accessing opportunities to be with their peers throughout the day, again, as their IEP requires and as they need. Sorry, it's not working. There we go. So I just wanted to shout out some things that we talk about systemically because these are some things we do really well. All the elementary schools have inclusion opportunities throughout the day. It might be through those collaborative, and I use co-taught and collaborative in the two different settings, but it's very similar in each setting. Again, the idea of a supported classroom could be that para support, it could be peer tutors. So really, all of our schools, both at the elementary, the middle, and our comprehensive high schools, have this continuum of opportunities or these multitude of opportunities for our students to access their peers on a regular basis. As you see at the secondary level, we start to add extracurricular and co-curricular activities because that's where we really start to get into having opportunities to do sports, to do our two high schools do their plays and musicals and all those things, and all the schools are working really hard to be inclusive in those opportunities. And I know we've talked about this before, but this idea that we've had more than 150 peer tutors in our secondary programming. I don't have the number of peer buddies at the elementary level because it's not a course. Like I can't go and identify that data because it's more like I tag team with my first grade peers, and so it's all of them. But at the secondary level, we were able to identify who has peer tutors and how many that is, and I think that's a huge shout out to the work that we're doing to be collaborative and to be inclusive with all of our students. I wanted to touch on this on SCORE really quickly again at the end of the year. And thank you all because this was a huge task that we underwent. Thank you to Isaac, who's here, and his team, and a huge shout out to Horizonte's administration for being amazingly welcoming of this program. I can't tell you enough. Every time I walk into that building, someone stops me and says just how amazing this program has just brightened and just the love that they feel. And it has been just amazing. I'm really excited to see what we continue to do. In working with their administrative team, we've talked about adding peer tutor options for our Horizonte students to also support our the post-high students, because they can always use peer support when they go into the community and they go to their jobs and they do our community activities that they do on a regular basis. So super exciting. I can't thank you enough for helping support this. This rollout has been absolutely amazing. So huge success there. Okay. We were recognized at some state meetings for directors this year, and I wanted to share it with you because I think this was really says a lot about what we're doing in our high schools. So part of the resolution talks about creating meaningful community members and having equitable access to community. When our students graduate high school, they fill out a little form for me with their name and where they're going to live next year and some next contacts. And we call every single high school graduate and say, what are you doing this year? Of the students surveyed, 25%, again, these are students with IEPs who graduated in 21. It is a couple years old. It takes the state a minute to get their data to us. surveyed said that they were enrolled in some type of higher education. The next two bullets are inclusive of that. So 81% of the students that were interviewed said that they were either in higher ed or competitively employed. And then 92% of the students who answered the survey were either higher education, competitively employed, or they were doing something else that was appropriate for their life, i.e. maybe they were on a church mission, maybe they were working on something that was important to them, but that's how they defined themselves, that they were doing something that was benefiting, a life activity that was benefiting them. So that was huge. We were the highest in the state for those numbers, and so I just huge shout out to our high schools for supporting our students in becoming productive citizens. Talking about the idea of some social emotional inclusion, but also just getting some work as far as, or some supports as far as Unified Champion Schools. I know this has been something Dr. Grant has really been in huge support of. I've also had some support, as I've presented on this previously, from Education Foundation and Mr. Yappius's team. We have 3 schools who have been actively involved in having Unified Champion teams this year. So Glendale Middle School, Highland High School, and West High School have had a variety of teams and participated in a variety of sports activities throughout the year. I want to note that next year, in working with our 3 comprehensive high schools, we're gonna, they call it Unified PE. It's the idea of having some inclusive PE opportunities. We are going to be adding at West High 1 sport. They haven't decided which one yet. And then East High is going to also join with one of the 3 sports that we've currently outlined within the high schools. But something that I thought was really important, it's working. There it goes. I wanted to do, like I said, the highlights would kind of be throughout. So I really wanted to call out our teams that have worked really hard on this. So Martha Beach, who is a consultant within my department, is our district level liaison, and she actually works directly with Unified Champion on like some board and does some work with them. But I wanted to shout out Camilo Gomez. He's one of our teachers at Glendale. He took it upon himself to make this happen. And then Haley Wilbert started our program at West. And huge shout out, they got invited to the U this year, to the women's basketball game. It was a really big deal. You're like, yes. It was a huge deal. And then also a shout out, we have 2 adaptive PE coaches, and they have been integral in supporting this and sustaining this throughout the district. And so thank you to Cody and Coach Dave for their support in helping this build momentum and sustain momentum. One thing, as we've talked with these schools, that I just want to consider as we look forward, some of our families, we're working again with the Education Foundation and like our CLCs, but some of our families need some additional supports. It might be language, it might just be time, like to access that doctor's exam isn't always as easy to navigate. And if you have a high school or middle school child, you will know what I'm talking about, because it's not just a cut and dry experience. So we're gonna work to support that moving forward. I also am working with my team, and as we work with transportation, to be conscientious about busing and making sure that those are wheelchair accessible, et cetera, when we do our activity routes. And then as we work with schools, just making sure that we're conscientious that our gyms and our fields are highly sought after. Like, they're very used, which is a great thing, but adding this is a mix to that we just need to be conscientious about. So working with administrators, and they've been super responsive. But again, as part of the resolution talks about or asks for needs. So I just wanted to be very transparent that these are things that we're working on to help all of our students access.
Advanced AI capabilities for more customization, more time, and more love.
Mohammed, I believe you've unmuted yourself.
My apologies.
Okay. It was in the slide, but huge shout out, Highland High. They had 2 basketball teams, and one of the 2 teams was the state champions. There was a huge tournament in West Valley. Hundreds and hundreds of teams competed, and they won the entire competition, which is amazing. So huge shout out to them and their work with basketball. This is also our Highland High group working. This was their soccer team. They did not make it, so I don't know if any of you were invited, but Real hosts the soccer tournament, and it was awesome. Martha and I went along with the team to just view, but their goal was to make it next year. And they have agreed to, well, Highland High administration's agreed to hold a bunch of soccer tournaments for the metro areas, which is super exciting. This is our West High team. Like I said, the U actually came to West High, worked out with the basketball team, and then gave them tickets to go to their game. And it was just awesome, just an awesome experience for our kiddos. Okay. The last little piece I wanted to talk about with this idea of inclusion is it's the adult, like the teacher piece of how we're supporting our educators and our sports staff and our administrators. And we work diligently every year to provide professional development, and it is inclusive professional development. We are including our general education teachers, our special ed teachers and administrators in all the work that we're doing. And really, I don't have a slide for this, but just a huge shout out to my direct staff that work with me at the district level. They're the ones behind this that help me make all this happen. Without them, I could not run. We probably did 50 plus professional developments this year, including para-trainings, and without them, we just couldn't get all the work done, and they've been so responsive to all of that I've asked of them, and I'm super grateful for them. Looking into next year, it's working. There we go. So looking into next year, we're going to, We're going to continue professional development again in August. Tiffany, Dr. Halls helped me schedule into the PD in the fall. So Equity and I are sharing some time. Nope. Where is it? There it is. That was the right one. So we're working on the PD in August. We're going to do a whole bunch of things around, again, the idea of how do we incorporate students' IEPs in the general ed setting so that, again, we're offering our least restrictive environment to all of our students as much as possible. And then I work with the special ed department. So we lead department PLCs year long, and we work on things anywhere from co-taught classrooms to, again, this idea of how are we writing and providing services into IEPs that are beneficial for that least restrictive, inclusive setting for our students. Oh, just kidding. I had them out of order in my brain. I'm going to go back one because I missed this. I really want to highlight 2 things. So Highland High is sending a team to the Meaningful Inclusion Conference that's happening next week, I believe, here in Provo, which I think is awesome. Linda Listway has been working with me all year on some ideas, and so she put together a team and is sending them. And then the state has awarded this opportunity to 3 schools. We had a number of them apply. But Glendale Middle School, North Star Elementary, and Washington Elementary are all going to be a part of this innovative improvement initiative that the state has labeled I3. It is a 3-year process where we are looking to improve outcomes for students, specifically with who have been identified as having IEPs or having special education services, but it is a systemic look. We are all, and I say we because I'm included in this, they have created school site teams that also include some area directors, myself, and then some special ed coordinators or consultant support. We're all going to a conference in June in St. George where we're working on this work for 3 days later this month, and it is intended to be creative in their thought processes and what they want to do to make changes within their schools, and they had to write a report and it had to be accepted by the state. So that's a big deal, and we can talk about that as we move into that process. I can provide some more information because we are still just in the groundworks, and that's what we'll do in June. So with that is all my moving forward. Any questions?
Board members?
I wanted to say thank you because the report adds a lot based on what we saw last year, and it includes a lot of what we asked for, which was the more precise data on how students were doing. And so it was really great, especially to see the higher education and employment information. The one thing we talked about last year, which I didn't see, was a little bit of an update on where our students are in behavior units. And I know that's something we hear about in our communities, but where data might not always be available due to the end size. I think that's what we talked about last year. So I started thinking about, as if we continue to receive updates on this resolution, it may also be edifying for us to review the different types of special education services. Because, for example, like I worked in school, so I may know what an essential elements class setup looks like, but maybe not everybody does. And I don't always know how behavior units are run in our school. So I wonder if year over year we might be able to get some more familiarity with various classifications of all the work you're doing, because it's a huge amount of work. And as we look at later in the budget, the additional $1 million that Alan suggested we invest in special education to cover these positions that are currently funded by ESSER, I do appreciate also hearing some of these asks about support that's needed to close gaps for athletics. Like, that's really helpful for me to know some of the specific things you're looking at in transportation. I wouldn't have known about the doctor's exams, for instance. And so it's nice to see some of those gaps highlighted, even if they're non-financial. So I really appreciate that. And that's just one suggestion moving forward to help us learn more about special education also.
Thank you, Ashley. And I also have a comment, and to dovetail, I just think it's such a wonderful thing to have this report annually, ever since we adopted our resolution. And I think, Krista, you and I might be the only two who are on the board when we adopted that. And to see the growth of what inclusion means for our students with disabilities or who are receiving special education services is just remarkable. And I know it's a huge ask, from you and your team, and from our site-based teams all the way to our network directors. So my hat's off. I mean, just all the elements that were presented tonight, they continue to grow, and they have grown year after year. So my comment is really just a giant thank you, and I look forward to the work that you have coming up this next year. And I'm always going to give a shout out. I do it every year, even before we have the resolution, for peer tutors, because it was a huge part of my high school career at East. And from my sophomore year until I graduated, I was a peer tutor, and I know I wasn't supposed to be one that long, so thank you, East, for that. But nonetheless, it really was the element that kept me engaged in school and through graduation. So thank you for doing that, and anything that we can do to support and continue to support the work that you're doing in regards to this resolution, in regards to the impact that we're having in the classroom, please continue to let us know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
I do have a
Oh,
question.
yes.
So in the looking forward, you had the Highland High School team that's going to the Meaningful Inclusion Conference. How does that work? How does the school create the team?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't. So the state had some parameters that they set forth. So when you applied to go to the professional development, they just indicated this is what we would like for a team. So, for example, they didn't want one teacher just showing up at this conference.
Right.
And so they had to have a team of anywhere from 3, I believe it was, to 6 or 7 individuals that they would identify. So I worked with Linda to identify some core teachers and then some special education teachers that they are already co-teaching or wanting to co-teach. To come together and then send that team to the professional development. As far as the program itself, I don't know. I can tell you when we get back from St. George, because our conference is the second, so they're doing 2 USBE BE is doing 2, the one in Provo and the one in St. George. And the slight difference is those schools got the grant in St. George. So we'll be doing some of that work. So I can tell you when I get back what they have planned, but I couldn't tell you what exactly their actual PD will look like, if that makes sense. My hope, though, is that they come back with a vision for themselves, and then they ask for help if there's areas that they want support in, and that we can work to make that happen.
Well, that's my hope. And it's nice to hear that it's core teachers but so it's a kind of a broad spectrum.
Yep, and I can tell you that for Glendale and North Star and Washington, I would not be able to immediately, but I can like see their things. And so they each had at least one gen ed teacher. They had to have at least, and I say at least one special education teacher because some of these buildings have 4, 5, 6. Right. They were asked to do a stakeholder member, so some of them did a community member, some of them did like a counselor. They all had their area director. I added my consultants who are supporting them, and then I have to be a part of that team as well for the initiative. So I do know that they all had at least one, if not 2 or 3 of their gen ed teachers. Some had counselors. Like it just varied based on the school's plan and their vision.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Aaron? Excellent, Aaron. Thank you for all the work that you and your team do.
Thank you.
All right. Before we move into the discussion agenda, I just want to remind the board and the community about our public hearing. It is a time certain at 7 p.m. regarding our 2024-25 budget. The 3 elements are the revised budget, annual budget, and the proposed tax rate. So Bryce and I are keeping a close eye on that clock. So when we hit 7 o'clock, regardless of where we're at in any of our discussion agenda, we will take the time necessary to hear from the public about their feedback to the board regarding those 3 elements of the budget. So with that, our first item on the discussion agenda is the 2024-25 Weapon Detection System Staffing Contract. B.A. Kersley, I'll turn the time over to you to introduce this and anybody that's presenting with you.
I'd like to invite Dr. Taylor up. He's got a PowerPoint presentation. We're going to be discussing, so we have weapons detectors in our 3 comprehensive and in Horizonte high schools. They are staffed with an independent third-party security firm. That contract is over basically with the end of this school year. So the discussions we need are, are we going to continue that that contract into next year? And I turn the time over to Dr. Taylor for his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
The presentation will be a review of some information that we've already submitted, plus a small entering of some additional information that will address some previous questions. When you look at it, the first pillar that we're dealing with is the learning environment stewardship and sustainability from our strategic plan. Our goal is to create safe and efficient facilities. What's the big picture? We introduced weapon detector systems at our comprehensive high schools and Horizonte during the 23-24 school year. The purpose of that was to increase the safety and security for students, staff, and visitors. These systems simply scan visitors and students as they enter the school to help identify metal weapons. The goal of the program is to increase safety and the perception of safety within those environments and produce and promote safety and peace of mind for everyone on campus. Our current objectives: to review the current PAL American staffing, to show how the weapon detector systems and staff fit into our overall plan, as well as address any outstanding questions. And let me know if I'm talking too fast.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
Our current status. From our previous presentation, we pulled stakeholder information, and these are simply just a rehash of some of those slides that we presented in that previous presentation. We had roughly 600 parents that responded and 75 teachers, 80 teachers that responded to the survey. When we asked the question from the stakeholder survey, were you familiar with the system? As you see, we got an overwhelming responses from staff and from parents. They are familiar with the system. when we ask the question, do you believe weapon detectors increase your safety during the school day? You see a balance across there. When you look at our teachers had a slight perception that they didn't. Our parents were the opposite. Our parents had a perception that they did. Now, the next question that we pulled was, do you think people have stopped bringing weapons to school because of the detectors? And as you see, you had teachers on the opposite end. Some of them disagreed, but our parents and our students had the perception that, yeah, we did have an increase there in terms of that. I feel like school is safer. You see those numbers. You're looking at, even the teaching staff then had a perception that around 50% of them were believing that the school is safer. The students, right around that same percentage, right a little bit below 50%. Parents, a little bit above 50%. We're using that neither agree or disagree as that neutral bar. And how confident you are that the weapons detector system has prevented incidents of violence at your school. Not pushing causality. We're not saying that's a direct relationship, except what's the perception of it. And you see them leaning roughly at 50% for teachers, a little bit above 50% for students, right at about 60% for parents, saying they were very confident and somewhat confident that the weapons detectors prevented incidents of violence at the school. We have an understanding that it takes a comprehensive plan or a program in order to maintain safety and secure environments at the school. The weapons detectors is simply one piece of what is a comprehensive plan. Our current staffing at our respective sites, East has 10 people from Palo America, Highland has 10, Horizonte has 2, West has 12, for a total of 34 people that's staffed through the Palo America contract. We also recognize that this staffing is essential for the weapons detectors to be utilized. We do not have the current staffing that if we don't have this, where we could run these weapons detectors. We've also modified the contract based on this year through our comprehensive evaluation of the program to where we have increased site level flexibility. The buildings can use them a little bit differently based on the DNA for that building. We looked at bathroom, non-weapon detector interests, that means non-secured interests, campus and hallway assistance by their staff. We enhanced our security protocols as part of our comprehensive plan. During the 23-24 year, we implemented stricter entry procedures, which included the use of weapon detectors and staffing. We also received an increased number of school resource officers from our partnership with the city, with the police department. We went from 5 to 7. During the 23-24 year, the district improved communication systems.
We have a clarifying question.
What number of SROs are in the MOU? Like
10. We're supposed to have 10.
But you increased from 5 to 7.
From 5
so
to
I just
7.
want to say, when we say we increased, we're still not at the level that we have an agreement with the city. Okay,
that's right.
Thank you.
We also implemented a new response system called Raptor that improved the communication system to quickly alert authorities and stakeholders in the event of emergency. We've also increased mental health services. You know, we have for this school year, we've implemented the West High Clinic. Also, we're a state-approved participating district for student mental health screenings. We have continued comprehensive mental health awareness and training programs to identify and address potential warning signs. CSTAG, we also utilize counselors and social workers, and Safe UT. We have crisis preparedness. That means we do our drills, we conduct regular safety drills and training exercises for students and staff. The schools also educate the community on what our responses will be. We've upgraded infrastructure and technology. That's the use of the weapon detectors, surveillance cameras, vape detectors were instituted this year. Also, we've modified the way that we flow into our campuses to provide direct building security and provide secure entry points. From our previous presentations, there was a request in terms of looking at our data for our violent our violent situations. And we looked at physical assault, physical aggression, we looked at weapons and guns. Now, I don't know why weapons and guns are classified separately. It's just how it's reported through the system. And we saw there was a 36.5% decrease in our situations that fall within those categories between last year and this year. We're not implying causality, we're just applying, answering the question. And that was the quick review.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We appreciate the review. Superintendent, is there anything you wanted to add before we take questions?
I'll turn it to Alan here.
Yeah, so just on the cover memo noted that we're really looking at using one-time money. We won't know an exact amount until we negotiate a contract with Pal American, but we're estimating to be about 1.5 million of one-time money to have these staffing levels throughout next year.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Board Member Jensen?
Well, my question would be, when is it that we actually have to renew this contract? Do we have some time here?
Right. So as a district, we have time. We have time to think about it, study it more. The vendor clearly would like to know sooner than later. So the staff that they've hired for this year know if there's a spot to come back at next year. So that's really the speed issue there for them, sooner than later, so they don't have to, have all their people go find other jobs and then try and recruit new people if we decide, in August. But from a district standpoint, really, so if we choose to continue this next year, so long as we can have stuff in place by the beginning of the school year.
Okay, so the follow-up question to that would be, we have that Safe Schools bill that we now have to address as well. And what I don't want to have happen is that we put the cart before the horse. And I understand that, December is when all of those assessments and all of that is supposed to be done on how much this is going to cost. And I have heard rumblings, I guess you would say, that Granite School District is already postulating or estimating expenses. Do we have any idea of how much that's going to cost? Because, 1.5 million, is this something that we're going to need to have access to address the Safe School bill? So when I'm saying how much time do we have, I'm wondering if there would be time for us to get some more information on the Safe School bill requirements so that I could make a little more informed, a more informed decision.
And with so we're talking House Bill 84, just so the public understands which bill we're talking about. So the only requirement there that has a date specific is by December 31st, those assessments have to be done, at which point those assessments will be reviewed with district personnel and the state safety chief to develop a security plan for each of the buildings. Of the items that are kind of listed in the bill that will, kind of as set as minimums, the one is an armed guard at every school. That's the one thing we have priced out. If we were to contract out one armed guard at each school, it's going to be about $1.9 million district-wide. Now, could be more or less depending on what those threat assessments or those safety assessments determine, because it could determine that a high school being a larger campus needs more than one. With a contract like Pal America, we could, you saw that staffing level, so 12 at West. We could just say, all right, I want 2 of those to be armed, which means then we're just paying the incremental cost between an unarmed and an armed security guard. So those are the ways we look at balancing those requirements. My estimate, just on how things generally work, and if you have one state chief that has to review all the plans for the state, I don't anticipate a lot of this, if any of it, being actually implemented until the 25-26 school year, just because it's going to take a lot of time to go through all those assessments and determine what to do at each school. That's just my personal opinion on how things might actually move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Jens, do you have any follow-up questions, or are you good there?
I think I do, but I'll let Ashley.
Okay. Board Member Anderson?
So Granite has estimated for their board members that out-of-pocket expenses are going to be up to 20 million in one-time costs and 8.5 in annual costs. So I guess I'm confused about why their board is receiving updates on the cost expectations, but also why they have committed a certain number of million in grant funds in addition to that. So we're looking at, like, they're told 28.5, which they have more schools than us, to be fair. So I don't know how to, make that a good ratio. But if we say 28.5 plus granted funds, are we pursuing any grants for any of the asks that we have? Or why would they have numbers and we do not?
So a couple things there. So there is a grant, one-time grants that they made available, but they haven't released the grant application process yet. When that grant application is released with the parameters, we will definitely be pursuing funds from that grant. It's just we don't know what the parameters are yet. They're probably also one of the kind of bases that they say in the law is about bulletproof film on all glass that's at ground level. Again, we haven't estimated that cost. Granite maybe has. So that's, with all their buildings, I suspect a good chunk of that's going to be in the 20 million. In addition, I think as districts determine the cost of this bill, we're going to be presenting this information to the legislature next year. If, like, you passed a bill, you didn't fund it, even this funding's not going to be enough of the grant award to go around the whole state to address what the minimum requirements of this bill. So we'll be talking to the legislature before their session and during their session next year, and hopefully we can have them actually fund this bill, or at least help fund it.
Any follow-up questions, Ashley?
Ashley, I'm curious, did it say what they're spending that on?
Yeah, it just breaks down the cost for the glass, for the alarms,
Okay.
for an estimate for the security guards. I mean, it's basically all of the asks of the bill, which I realize that they're getting an estimate because, as you point out, the assessment hasn't taken place. But I'm wondering why they're getting, kind of gross estimates, which are a lot, and we don't have an estimate when it would be an important part of making this calculus, whether you support the systems and think they're effective or don't support them and don't think they're effective. Either way, it's a certain amount of money in an overall pool of what we have to do.
One of the things that Alan has considered is using this contract, if we needed to bring the armed guards to our schools, that this would be one way to do that. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Right. So all of the Pal American contractors that we have now, we pay in a rate for an unarmed guard. They also provide an armed guard service, which we could, whether it's amend the contract we have for the security weapons or create a new contract. This is a vendor that can help provide those services. Just because looking at having employees be the ones that are carrying the weapons with the restrictions that they've placed on there, I think that'll be very difficult to actually staff every school in the district with an employee who's willing to take on that role.
The other piece of this is we've chosen not to provide those numbers because there's such uncertainty about them. They don't feel very solid. Will we have to have glass on all buildings right now or just on new ones? We don't know. Would it have to be of one quality or another? We don't know. So we can run those totals, but it actually may not be real dollars because they may not be real expectations. There's been so little information that's come out so far about what requirements will be held to on what kind of time frame that we've chosen not to run up those totals because it just doesn't seem real yet. I think over the next months we'll get more and more information. I know at our next superintendent's meeting, the state security chief will be speaking to superintendents and hopefully asking some questions that all superintendents have about what's happening. But again, some of this is just over time as they're doing the threat assessments and other things. They don't have any protocols in place yet, even about how we're supposed to go about these sorts of things around the threat assessment. All of that is just being developed right now. So we could put together an estimate based on everything they have in the bill and what we think it would cost. We just don't know if we're going to be required to do everything that's in the bill or on what kind of timeline. So if that's helpful, let us know. But again, it's not a very solid estimate just because we have so little information right now.
If I could follow up to that, I would say that's exactly why I don't think, no matter where we land on this, we should move forward with a contract knowing that these are not going to be staffed over the summer anyhow. And if we have more time to make a more financially sound decision that takes into account all of the factors, I think that's worth it. Because I don't feel like it's particularly responsible, even for members of the group who think these systems work and that staffing them works, that we will be able to have the money to commit without knowing what our other obligations are first.
I don't know that we'll have that by the time school starts. Meaning I don't know that we'll have an estimate of what this bill will cost us by the time school starts. Hopefully we'll learn more, but I'm not certain.
Board Member Swett.
Thank you. So I appreciate the conversation that we're having right now, but I feel in my head that this is our two different conversations. The first one is that we're being asked, whether or not we want to renew this contract. The second piece, which is subsequent of our legislature, and my biggest pet peeve of unfunded mandates, is something we're not going to know anything about until the end of the year. I mean, that's just a fact. And I think that once the state safety chief gets in there and can make an assessment, there's probably going to be a long conversation with the legislature about how do you put that kind of a burden on our public schools without funding something towards that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing Alan saying is that for this contract for this year, we're going to use one-time money to renew this contract. And for me personally, being a board member that sat through multiple meetings with our principals and talking about the school safety issues, that they felt like this is something that they needed to have in their building to help tamp down some of the safety issues. Does it cure all of them? It doesn't. But for me, as I look at this, I still have not heard our principals come back. And Dr. Taylor, you can certainly tell us if our principals are saying, nope, yank them, let's not do this again. But I haven't heard that from my community or from my parents, saying, let's not have these, in our high school. I tend to lean towards wanting to definitely have an assessment of what you're talking about, Ashley. I think it's really important for us to have that. But I really don't think we're going to know anything until January of 2025. And then it probably won't be implemented, or even possibly not even implemented until August of 2025. We don't know that for sure. But for right now, as I look at this, I think that what I'm understanding you wanted us to do, President Salazar, tonight through this, and what Dr. Lisan Taylor's asking is for us to say yes or no, right, on putting the contract back in. And that the contract, they need to hire people in order to get ready for the school year, right? And it feels like we have a long time, but it's going to go fast. So I worry about us dragging our feet a little bit. If we need a little bit more information, then I'm happy for us to do that. But I don't want us to base that information, whether we do this contract, on what's going to happen next year with this unfunded mandate that is going to be imposed on us. I feel like they're two separate things.
I appreciate that, Christy, because that's, as I'm listening to the conversation, it's like I'm hearing kind of two different approaches of let's kind of wait and gather more information, and I'm also hearing from, let's not drag our feet either. There were some really like kind of critical asks and needs that we are meeting with these elements, and again, does it solve everything? It doesn't. And I think what I would like to add to the conversation is a question to Alan and to Dr. Taylor. What happens if we don't approve this tonight, or if we don't approve this contract moving forward? Where does that leave us, one, with the lease that we have with the machinery? And then where does that leave us with what we're going to be doing next year to make sure that we're still keeping students and faculty safe inside of our buildings?
Right, so let's address the first question. So if we don't have the staff to, if we don't renew this contract, we don't have enough personnel to have these at each of the doors. So we'll basically have to not use them next year. Now, we did, so we've prepaid the 48-month lease, so we'll have the equipment. It's ours to use. If there was a special event that a high school wanted to pull it out for and they could staff it with their own personnel, on a one-off basis, they could do that. But on a day-by-day basis, they don't have the personnel to manage them. So if you remember when we bought these, we used, again, money from a grant from the state for safety issues. But it's kind of like the sunk cost, so that money's, we spent that money, it's gone. But in essence, without the staff from Pal American, we can't use them on a daily basis like you see them used now. And you're going to have to help me remember the second part of the question.
I guess what happens to the machinery that we do have a lease? We've invested in.
Right. So in theory, it'd be either put away or used. If they wanted to pull them out, because they are portable. If they wanted to pull them out for a sporting event or something, and then use their own current staff to man them, then they could.
You have a sense of what a school year's cost would be based on the lease agreement that we do have for the machines specifically?
So the 48-month lease district-wide was about $1.2 million. So 48's 4 years divided by the schools we have, a couple $100,000.
Thank you. Board Member Bade, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you so much for those information. So I just have some questions. So the one-time money, if we do not use it towards renewal of the contract, what can we use it for? That would be, what other venue we could use that money towards?
Right, so the one-time money is coming out of fund balance, so we always want to use one-time money on one-time expenditures. So it could be used for any type of, one-time. If this bill requires us to put bulletproof glass, it could be used towards that as well, because those are one-time expenditures. But
okay.
That hasn't been discussed or really decided yet.
Okay. So if we also, how much we will be saving if we do not renew the contract?
So we're estimating about $1.5 million.
Okay. So $1.5 million if we do not renew the contract, but also we do have the option of using those weapon detectors at our sporting events. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we have reached 7 p.m., at least on my clock. Will you please just hold that question, and we're going to open up our time certain public hearing on our 2024-2025 budget. So I just wanted, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no worries, you're
thank
good.
you, Board Member Bade. So we have reached the public hearing portion of our meeting, a time certain at 7 p.m. for public hearing regarding our 2024-25 budgets, the revised budget, our annual budget, and the proposed tax rate. Is there anybody here with us tonight that would like to speak to either three of those elements of our budget, our annual budget?
Harmon's shaking his head no.
I'm shocked, Mike. He told us he was waiting for another topic at some future point. All right, well, we'll just leave it for another minute or two, and if nobody speaks, then we'll revisit this on our action agenda. Anything you wanted to add, Alan, or are we good? Okay.
We're good.
I hear the elevator.
Maybe there's somebody Coming on the elevator. You never know.
There's a hurricane.
I'll wait till 7:02 on my clock.
It's only 7 on mine.
Uh,
7:01.
It's 7:01.
You know, I have to be, so I get to places.
Last time we went too fast, so maybe wait till 7:05.
You got it.
Yeah, yeah, I think
That
that's a
sound
good
all right?
idea.
That works
That,
for me.
that was the
That's a
truth
good
and
idea.
taxation hearing.
I know, right? It was.
Okay, so I've got a couple of minutes.
Motion to saunter.
We could have the mariachi band come back.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
The best.
Oh, my gosh.
I
So
actually went
amazing.
down to Riley and the band is larger than what we saw. Like, they have a whole, like, 2 to 3 times as large as the group that was here was playing at their final day assembly, and they're gonna try and keep that going at Parkview next year.
I hope
so-
they do.
Yes,
I
I do
hope they
too.
do.
Yep.
That'd be such an asset for that school.
Mm-hmm. The teacher did a terrific job getting that up and going.
Oh, my gosh, she was so great.
It's a lot of fun.
Should we see if the spilled milk will deliver?
That'd be great.
Yes.
I support it.
However, I'm waiting for a message. So my peeps.
Going off yours, not mine, since I'm early. All right, we have reached that 5-minute marker, maybe even a little bit more since we started off my early clock, but nonetheless, we have reached that point. So we will continue our discussion in the discussion agenda on our weapons detectors. And Board Member Bate, I'm sorry I had to interrupt you for that public hearing time certain, but will you please restate your question and we can continue the conversation?
Yeah, thank you. How dare you interrupt me?
Jeez, I know. I'm really worried about that.
So Alan, you stated that it is $1.5 million that we would be saving by not renewing the contract. So I am certain that every board member out there, safety is top in their mind. And I personally also take safety very seriously. Now, weapon detectors, yes, they do serve a certain purpose. However, at our schools, they really are more like a dam that just blocks students from moving through. So, and being able to make it to the class and all of that stuff. So, and plus, if there is some lunatic and want to do something, they'll do it right outside the school. So what I'm like, I urge my fellow board members there to really hold off of renewing this contract. That is $1.5 million. That is a lot of money. So many zeros in there. Let's put that one-time money into, having our schools be completely, there is enough supplies out there that no parent will be involved in, like bringing some extra supplies or so. Let's, I don't know if we can have them towards that, whatever we could do, anything that would lead into the development of our kids, I think that would be a worthwhile investment than these weapon detectors. But at the same time, we would not waste, we would not waste them. Let's use them at our sports facilities, for the remainder of the contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bade. And I do want to kind of jump into the conversation. I definitely hear where you're at with the cost savings, Mohammed, but I think where I was trying to go to with my previous question to Alan is we would actually not be utilizing funds that we've already spent, with not utilizing these weapons detectors to the sum of $200,000. So for me, I don't see it as cut and dry as we're saving 1.5, yes, but we're also losing out on, more or less half of a $1.2 million investment that we would not be utilizing the service or the machinery for. So I just wanted to put that out there. Vice President Williams.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts, maybe not questions right now, but thoughts. So we were at this table about a year ago deciding on the initial first year contract on this. And at the time, I had shared that most of my constituent base that had reached out to me at the point was very much in favor of the weapons detectors and seeing what they had to do. And I followed that constituent voice at that time and voted in favor of the one-year contract. Following the vote of that, I heard a loud outcry from my constituents who did not respond originally, who were very upset with this and were absolutely appalled that we had approved this contract and that we were putting weapons detectors in. So I've been spending that last year really listening to that, thinking through that. Throughout the course of the year, that same group of my constituents continues to send me articles and data and shows me some things that I should consider as we are approaching potentially the vote tonight or maybe here in the next couple of weeks. I do recognize that, weapons detectors and this contract are a piece of that comprehensive plan. I do understand that getting back to the Pal America folks about whether or not they have jobs in these particular situations, that's important because we don't want to leave people without that immediate, timely security of their jobs. I do understand that there's the piece of the Safe Schools bill that we have to think about and where that's going to go. I do know that we've also approved a 48-month lease on these detectors, but the problem that I'm running into as we continue to have these conversations is I'm not seeing any data that shows that these detectors actually work. So I don't know if we're not seeing data on the detectors working, why we would fund folks to staff those. So that's kind of where my head is right now. As Mohammed had said, safety is a valuable factor in all of this, and I want to make sure that we are keeping our faculty, staff, families, visitors safe when they're in our schools, but I'm still just not seeing the data that's showing that these are working, and therefore I'm really having a hard time supporting renewal of the contract at this moment.
Thank you, Bryce. And thank you, everybody, for the discussion. Let's move into round two. Board members.
Said you didn't get Jenny.
Jenny, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just had, your survey that you put out were general questions, but do you have, like, real pros and cons from the principals who actually came here and requested this ask? Maybe even real input from the students? Like, besides the general, because that general could look like,
We've had information from the principals, but realizing that it's due to the program implementation of the weapons detectors. On one hand, we've had some very positive feedback from 2 sites, and we've had some not so positive feedback from another site. So it really kind of balances out. We can bring the principals forward and they can provide individual testimony, but based on what we've gotten in terms of their feedback, you have 2 sites that are really pro the weapons detectors and 1 site that's not so supportive of the weapons detectors.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm trying to think, actually, a big part of me tries to think like a parent, but I've heard a lot of feedback from the students, from students that I know, and they majority are saying that it's useless. It has become useless to them because they still have this bathroom problem, right? Where kids are getting bullied in the bathroom, smoking in the bathroom. Bathroom is where the problem's at. It's not the entry where the metal detectors are, it's the bathroom. Because I would be thoroughly interested in a deeper assessment too. I'm not in no hurry with Palm America because it's for our students. It's always been students first. Yeah, as a parent, you probably want to be the adult and think, no, it's, we're trying to do stuff for your safety, but these kids are there every day, and it seems like I'm still hearing there's a lot of stuff that happens with the metal detectors there from my community that has gone down. And so I'm kind of, I'd like some more depth in that. Yeah.
Can I add to what Jenny's saying?
So I'll go after these guys.
Okay.
We can go in the same order.
Okay, that's fine.
To add to what Jenny is saying, I think we do hear a lot about, as Dr. Taylor said, there are people who are pro and people who are con. But what is really missing, which I think is what Jenny was asking for and Bryce was asking for, is evidence that it works. So there's, 60 years of school gun violence data that shows bottlenecking your entrance decreases your safety level. That's hard evidence about where gun violence has happened and how it happens in an entrance. We're bottlenecking the entrance. We aren't getting data on, has this reduced specific, we got 1 percentage of violence reduction, which you shared, and you said we can't identify it as causal. But then what can we identify as causal? Because there's been 1 study of Evolve that was comprehensive, which showed it detected a small percentage of overall guns and an even smaller percentage of overall knives. So if the system's not working, I don't want to engage in some kind of sunk cost where we're throwing good money after bad because we don't have any evidence that it works. And that's what I think is perhaps what some people are asking for, is not evidence about how people feel about it. This is what I said in the last meeting. It's irresponsible to make decisions based on how we feel about this model and how we feel about its efficacy when we can't measure its efficacy. And it seems like there have to be ways we can quantify and qualify what is in fact working versus how we feel about it. Like, I'm a lifelong fan of the theater. I don't want to engage in security theater to the tune of $2 million. I would like to look at real evidence, and I don't feel like that's something that we've been provided, and I don't know what can be provided to us to help those of us who are saying in our experience we see it's not working, and how do we balance that with that some people feel that it is.
Board members. I can't remember who went first. Board Member Jensen.
When we look at those survey responses, and you presented 3 or 4 slides that were pulled from that, the one where it seems like it's the highest is perception of safety. And I think that perception of safety is nice, but actual safety is critical. And I mean, I think we all want to feel like we're safe, but it goes to Board Member Anderson, theater and that sort of thing. Having said that, when I look at those responses from the parents, the students, and the teachers, again, Jenny says she's looking at it from the parent perspective. I appreciate that because you have children and I want that perspective. I'm looking at it from the teacher. A lot of times that's where I look at it from, is the teacher perspective. And a lot of the teachers were, we don't know if this is, in fact, they weren't, some of them felt like it wasn't providing that much safety. And for me, teachers, they're in the building. I mean, they have the experience in the classroom where they see what's going on. I don't know if teachers are seeing things showing up in their classrooms that they're going, why didn't that get picked up? And I don't know what it is that's making teachers say, we're not confident that it's making the school safer. So I guess my ask there would be, have we asked the teachers? I mean, yeah, you've told us that you don't feel like it's that much safer, but can you give us information? Can you give us data as why you're feeling the way that you're feeling? And then my other question is, this goes to Mr. Kersley, Board, Alan. I was trying to be, very dignified, recognizing your position. You indicated that we could use the PAL employees also as the security officers. And I mean, we are going to need to have security officers. So I want to have a follow-up question on that. And that is, would those officers be manning the devices as well as, being the secured, do they have 2 hats? They're running the machines and then they take their hat off and, then they do the other armed thing?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't worked that out, but my thought process would be yes. They would do dual. They would be our armed guard there to do whatever armed guards are supposed to do per the law, and also be manning the weapons detector system.
Okay, and then one other follow-up to that, and I'm trying to get in my time here. So training, one of the things I think that you talked about was we don't want to lose those PAL employees and then have to retrain. I like the idea that, we're using people that are now trained. So, I don't want to forego that. But do we feel like those people have been trained to be able to handle the armed situation as well?
So their training is largely by PAL American as their employer, and I don't know exactly the details. I know when we first hired them, we kind of set out some basics. I don't know if Dr. Taylor can address those, but because this is, they're a nationwide company, and this is kind of what they do. So there is training that they have. I just don't know the details of the training.
Okay, so if we took a couple of more weeks, do you think we'd be losing the PAL employees that are trained?
Don't know. I think the risk there is, if there's more information that we think we could bring to you to help you make a better informed decision, and if we think we could get that in the next, board meeting or 2, then I think it's worth that time to get that data. If if there's information, like one thing we'll never know is which guns did not come into the school because of the weapons detectors. We can never actually put a number to that, because even if you send a questionnaire, hey student, did you not bring your gun to school today because of the detectors? What we know is that there were no guns confiscated in the schools over this last year. That doesn't, I mean, were there guns in the schools? I don't know, but I know that there weren't any that were reported through our system, which the previous year there were. So as far as, and I just don't know from data and facts if we can get much beyond that.
Board Member Sweat?
Thanks. So I think one of the most difficult jobs that we have as board members is at times to take our personal feelings about an issue and set that aside. And because I have very strong feelings about weapons detectors. But my job at this table is to listen to the information and listen to the people who are boots on the ground in our schools. And, that's what led us to the position that we're in right now, around the detectors. I feel like what my job is to take that information, listen to the feedback. There has to be a needs assessment from the building, which I felt like we were getting from the principals back then. At this point right now, what I'm trying to do is put, there is lots of research that's out there. But what I really am trying to hone in on is what's the needs assessment of our high schools in Salt Lake City School District. Are we still in the same situation? Are principals still feeling the same way? Are kids still feeling the same way? Where we were when we decided that we would look at, taking this recommendation to get these weapons detectors. So if Alan's telling us that we have a little bit of time and we want more information, then let's be specific about what information we need so that our job here at this table is to assess that information, listen to the people who are the boots on the grounds in our schools, and then be able to make that decision together collectively. It's at times, so Dr. Taylor, for me, I think what I'm looking for is the same level of information that we got when we went into this is, what are the needs assessment of the schools right now? Do the principals feel like, they are helping? Is it not helping? I'm looking at the survey information, as Brian's pointed out several times, thinking, okay, well, it's kind of a mixed bag, but yet at the same time, there's probably some kids that would be some of our students that would say, absolutely, I feel more safe. And then there'd be those that say, it doesn't make a difference. Same with our teachers or maybe even our principals. So the question that you asked, President Salazar, and what I'm hearing that Dr. Taylor could provide for us is I need to have a little bit more information. I'd like to have some feedback from the schools and what are the needs at the schools right now if we're going to continue to have this contract. I would rather, if we could get it in the next couple of weeks, that would be better, so that we were, set through the month of June, knowing what we're going to be doing to be able to tell Pal America. But that's where I was when we started this conversation 2 years ago. That's where I am tonight, is to say, let's provide, the information to the rest of the board so that we can make those decisions. Let's put our feelings aside and think about, what our job is to make those assessments, but also make sure that we have the people's voices at the table that we need. And those are the people who are in the schools.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Board Member Seek, anything else you'd like to add in the second round of discussion?
I have an experience.
Yeah.
Our past graduation. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Our past graduation, I was informed that the metal detectors there are the same. Yeah. They stopped me a couple times asking for credentials, no matter how many times I came through. But as soon as I voiced that, I'm a board member, I participate, it was just that, okay, let her through, without any checking my bag, because I know that there was prevention of no bags in that University of Utah Huntsman Center. But yet, because of, what I said, it was okay for me to go through. However, I feel like how many times does that happen in our school? when these kids come through, you know, oh, a teacher walks by, oh, that's so-and-so, he's okay. Or so-and-so, she's okay. You know, I say this with, what if we stop this and all of a sudden something happens to our school, right? But at the same time, I'm all like, I'm really not sure. Like, just like everybody has been saying, that we approved a major ask from our constituents and our faculty and stuff, but that's a lot of money that we've approved, and we just have nothing to show for it, I feel. So it's a bit hard for me.
Board Member Bate, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so Brian earlier asked about teachers, and every teacher at a high school level that I talked with, they all oppose, these metal detectors, because they have so many students coming in so anxious about arriving late. And not only that, some of those teachers as well, they stood out there to just see how the process is going on. And they do not see it in any way providing some form of a protection or safety for our schools. So that's what I heard from the teachers who are at some high schools that I've been to.
Thank you, Board Member Bate. I'll go ahead and take, or Vice President, was you going to skip anything to add?
Just something super small. Hearing what Mohammed's saying, but also Christie's contribution around a needs assessment. I think if we are asking for a needs assessment, and it's similar to what both Board Member Bate and Board Member Jensen are saying, with folks that are boots on the ground, I think that needs to include our teachers as well, not just the administrators.
I was
Okay, I thought so, but I wanted to clarify.
the whole.
Thank you.
Bryce. I think I'm just going to wrap up the conversation by saying, Dr. Grant, I don't think we're in a spot right now. I think what I'm hearing from the board is that we want more information. And I think we've heard some of what those elements of information are that board members are asking for, the needs assessment element, maybe some more hard data on relative to how these are working. I hear where you're coming from, Alan, about what that means and how we gather that, because it is somewhat subjective. And so I'm in a spot right now where what I really want to say, just as a board member and not the board president, is that I don't want this board to be in a spot where we're talking about not having enough information and then ultimately making a decision without the information that we need. And I have always felt like we were venturing down, this pathway with one, machinery, and two, with a staffing contract, more or less kind of as a pilot or even an experiment. I hate to use something like safety, student safety in particular, as a pilot or as an experiment. I don't want to define it as that. But I'm wondering, and my question to my board colleagues to think about as this information is gathered, is have we given this the time that it needs to gather the very information that we all are saying we need? And so I really want, all the elements of how we might feel about it personally or what the research says, let's really zero in on our schools and seek and ask the questions that we need to get the information that we need to make that informed decision. Because I know regardless of what we do, we're going to take a critique, in the decision that we make. And I don't want us to be in a spot where we're making a decision where we're asking for information that we don't have and still move down the pathway of making that decision. So my question to you, Dr. Grant, is based on the conversation this evening, do you feel like you and your team, Alan and Dr. Taylor, can pull together some answers to the questions that are being asked tonight for our next board meeting, or within a time frame that makes sense relative to our obligations with the contractual agreement that we have?
Alan, jump in here, and I'll jump in as well.
Yeah, so I think, step one, let's invite some principals to the next board meeting to talk about their boots on the ground experience. I'm going to in the summer, it might be a little harder to get teachers, but I'll defer to my SLEA friends over there. What do you think about being able to get some teachers to come talk in a board meeting?
Can I say something?
We can try.
And maybe the principals have some connections. And I mean, again, we don't need a whole slew of them, but a good representative population.
I just wanted to say that I think that's not going to be the way that we get information. Like if you follow up on the student comments, they're pretty specific about how and why students feel these don't work based on their experience. I don't know any teacher who, first of all, I don't know any principal who might reject the other things that we're getting out of this contract, which are not being discussed. That this discussion has been centered on them staffing weapons detection, but then also people will say they built relationships with them, they helped with the bathroom issue, but that's not the way this has been framed, so we haven't talked about that. So if we gathered a group of principals to come talk about some of the benefits they've had from these staff, this is not the only way we can pay staff to help with the bathrooms. I mean, we could talk about all kinds of personnel that would make that sort of difference. But I don't know any teacher who will come and talk about the very negative experiences with weapons detection in an open public meeting. And there has to be some other way to follow up on the surveying with specific faculty who reported specific problems. Like, I don't think, again, I don't want this to become a theatrical discussion where principals and teachers feel they have to come perform about how this thing works because they're unwilling to talk about some of the hazards they've experienced on the job. So just to put out there that I don't think engaging in the discussion that way is going to be the way we hear real information, not from students, not from teachers, not from principals.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate that. I don't know how to follow up to that, Alan, other than I think for me, Ashley, I hear all the places that you're coming from, and I've read the articles that you've sent me and that other folks have sent me, and the reality is that we're stuck between some contracts, we're stuck between a lease with machinery, we're stuck with a school year. That is, we can't change those elements. And you're right, I agree with you that we probably can't get all of the information that we need to ultimately have a sound decision, which is why I was more or less kind of pushing for or encouraging us to think about, have we given this enough time to get the information that we could get in another additional year? And I think where I stand right now, I've heard the feedback and the elements of hazards and the bottlenecking. The one thing that sticks out to me is what Alan said just a few minutes ago, which we also don't talk a lot about, which is there were 0 guns detected inside of our schools this year. And compared to previous years, I know that number is a lot more than 0. I think those are the things that are sticking out to me in making sure that we're making sound fiscal decisions along with the decisions and responsibilities that we have towards keeping our environment safe. And so there's just, we're kind of bookended by some previous work and decisions that we made with some contractual stuff and timelines that we can't push too much further. So I'm just, kind of seeing if we could, right, if we don't get the information we need, does the information we need exist in an extension of where we're at? Kristen?
So I appreciate what you're saying, Ashley. I think that, it can be uncomfortable when you're in a public meeting, as we all know, to have to talk about things that are sensitive or awkward. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not going to independently make this decision without having some more information from the people who are in the schools. That was the whole reason we even entered into this conversation in the beginning, was because they came to us, and asked, here, we need to have some solutions because of the safety issues that we have. So I don't know what that looks like. I appreciate, I'm trying to think through in my head, what that would look like and what you would be able to gather in. I think that, but I'm uncomfortable making a decision independently based on what I feel is fragments and not everything that I need in front of me as we've talked through this. And so, for my own personal, I mean, Nate, I think, and Superintendent Grant, that, this started with a conversation with the principals. I think that if they want to speak with you independently instead of coming to a board meeting, then so be it. But I think that we need to hear that perspective and get the feedback, and also from our teachers. I have total confidence, that Mike and James would be able to talk to some teachers, and a handful of, James works at high school, at Highland, one of the schools that has a detector. So I think that I'm feeling as though, yes, I can appreciate the awkwardness and how uncomfortable it might be for people to come to an open meeting, but I think that this is an important decision for us. And so I don't have enough solid pieces. I have too many fragments.
Thank you, Board Member Swett. I'm going to go ahead and end the conversation.
If I
Dr. Grant, if you want to
may
kind of
just
round it
ask,
out.
so
Great.
I appreciate those remarks about who you'd like to hear from. What I'd like to understand, and given that without, I believe, Ashley, a random control trial, I'm not sure we have efficacy data that you would like about the effectiveness of these machines, right? I think we don't have that we don't have an ability to collect that data that would be useful, I think, along those lines that what you're talking about.
That show its inefficacy, which is important for us to know. That the only studies that have been conducted show it's not effective and have not been provided to the board. Does that make sense?
That those studies have not been?
Yes. It's not an issue of we haven't collected data on exactly what's happening in the schools. It's that there's a whole preponderance of data across the country from people using them, which essentially would demonstrate to board members that, this is not a slam dunk effective strategy. And we haven't been given evidence that has been collected from other places about how these tools work or don't work, nor about the efficacy of guards themselves. And if that works or doesn't work. And you'll find, there's a huge amount of public health literature that exists that is about using it in schools. So that, I don't mean we can pull data from, the air, but that data exists and we haven't been given access to it in the public meeting to discuss.
That's the kind of question that I need, even just hearing from board members. Saying you want to hear from teachers, I can understand the principals. The teachers one, I'm a little more uncertain about what information you'd like that was not captured in the survey that way. So that coming back to this question, we have a clearer sense of the information you'd like to have. More specificity, as I think Christy was saying earlier, about what you'd like from us. Even just Ashley's remark there is helpful that way. That's helpful to us. Otherwise, we may just come back with what we have, and that seemed insufficient. So I'd like some more information on that. That can come at another time, unless you have that on the top of your head right now, the sorts of things that you'd like to hear more about.
Can we get, sorry, go ahead. And I don't know this, this is just kind of, the people who have been in our schools, the Pal America Guard, is there a way to get some kind of assessment from them also, to be able to see, they're the ones who are there, they're working with the kids. I don't know. That might be another element, to look at and say, I don't know if that would really provide anything of an insight, but I'm just trying to think of the people who are in the building.
Well, in the interest of time, and I know I think we could be at a spot where we're just kind of having the same conversation over and over again, which is fine, but we do have other important board business to get to. My thinking is that please send the specific questions that you feel like you need answered to Dr. Grant, to Alan, and to Dr. Taylor, so that we can have a continued and more robust conversation relative to how this is working, how it's interacting with teachers, administrators, students, and so on. And then any additional questions that you have, please get those to Dr. Grant as soon as you can, so that, again, we can just continue the conversation in 2 weeks. Does that work for?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the discussion. It was an important discussion. Item number 2 on our discussion agenda is a sustainability phase 2025. D.A. Kearsley, I think I'm going to have you introduce this one with members of your team. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. So as we continue with the board's sustainability resolution, it seems like it's the night of resolutions, past resolutions of the board. We have Executive Director, Auxiliary Services, Isaac Astill, here to present to us, and he's got some visitors with him, so I'll let him introduce who they are.
Thank you, board members. Behind me are some much smarter people than I am. You've got DJ Hubler, Lynn Alder, and Greg Lebecci. All part of this team that it was created long before I got here. But excited to talk to you about what's been done and what the next opportunity is to continue to work towards the goals that the board has set. The Sustainability Action Plan of 2040 is a very challenging one, but it is at the forefront of what Greg focuses on every day and what McKinstry's worked really hard to accommodate and work with us to do. I'll start out by saying that up to this point, you guys have been presented with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and I apologize, I've complicated this a little bit. But as you know, phase 1 has taken several years to get to the point where we're at. We're excited to say that it's mostly complete. There are a few things that we're still making some tweaks on, but for the most part, it's complete. We've seen improvements of energy efficiency. Greg's been working with our CPA firm to do the tax request for an IRA from the federal government, which is well over $1 million return for the investment for the school district. And we'll go from there on this. I'm sorry. We've been working with McKinstry on the guaranteed maximum, we call it the GMAX, guaranteed maximum costs to do the next phase. And that's what we'll be talking about tonight, and that's for the fiscal year. Its next phase is fiscal year 25 because it's just a project that we hope to fund and complete in the next fiscal year so that we can show that we're making progress year after year rather than the 2 larger phases. Before that, though, thank you for the progress that you guys committed to in this process, and the gentlemen behind me have worked tirelessly on that to meet your goals. So tonight, the objectives, we're going to talk to you about what the proposed scope of work is this next year, the sustainability goals, progress, the pro forma variables, which there's a couple different things that can change what this opportunity is, and then obviously the guaranteed GMAX. So phase 2025, this is the proposed project, which would be the solar electrification of 8 more schools. I'm sorry, 7 more schools, one of those being a high school. And then the last thing is a project at the transportation facility. If you remember, there are 3 rows of covered parking for the buses that were installed several years ago. One of those has solar panels on it. This is to do the next phase of that, and part of that is to help cover the cost of the electric, to make it more efficient for the electric buses that are plugged in there, which, if you're not aware, your rate goes up. The highest rate of the spike over the billing period, that's where they mark and say, okay, this is what we're charging you from, and then there's a bunch of other numbers that make it hard to read your bill. So transportation is one of those. There's also a few other aspects to this. One of those is weatherization of facilities across the district. So checking, doing heat checks and filling in any places where cold or hot air are exiting the building easily. And then There's a discussion about rate switching that can save the district some money. And then lastly is a education aspect to this to help our students understand what we're doing and the benefits of it and how they can learn from that and do it themselves. So overall, the project total for all of this is $7.7 million with an annual guaranteed savings of about $360,000. To show you what's been done and what Phase 2025 will do is, as you can see, we were nearly 9%, or we were at 9% after Phase 1 on renewable energy. And then with this, if this phase is approved by the board, we would see an additional 9% increase. I'm sorry, if I can do my math right. I'm looking at Phase 2025 in total progress. So Phase 2025 would double where what we've done up to this point. And then also would get us to 32% of carbon free across the district, which is the end goal in 2040. The utility cost avoidance, this is a big challenge. I'm sure you're all aware, you've seen your own utility bills, especially gas bills, how much they've increased over the last little while. But Phase 2025, cost avoidance of an additional 10.6%. Natural gas 1.7, but overall our progress was eliminating about a little over a third of our utility cost avoidance. The 8 projects for the solar this year, this is these gentlemen's fine work of showing what the production of the areas would be and the offsets comparatively to the solar versus what our electric bill is.
Just if I jump in, you know, we are at 30 million kilowatt hours as a district, so this would reduce it by a solid 10%. I mean, that's a big chunk.
Thank you, Greg. So these gentlemen behind me, like I said before, they're much smarter than I am, but they've dug into this rather deeply, and they're currently we're on a rate of 6 for our utility electric billing. There's an opportunity that Rocky Mountain Power is offering of a 6A rate, which changes the tables a little bit, which decrease our costs at night. There's a potential increase during the day at certain points, but by offsetting with the solar, the 6A rate would save us quite a bit of money, and I'll show you that a little more in the next slide. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So talking about the rate 6A switch, if we've already done Phase 1, you can see the 6 schools on there, and then the ones that are recommended for switch 6A if fiscal year 25 is approved. There would be an initial setup cost of about $20,100, but a guaranteed annual savings from McKinstry of $33,250 to do that. The proposed weatherization, again, McKinstry and Greg have worked very closely to talk about what the different things, the scope of the work is: exterior doors, weather strip sealed, overhead doors, the windows sealed, the roof walls sealed, all of those things listed. The cost, the guaranteed cost investment would not go above $1,270,000. That's the guaranteed cost. But we, again, with their experience, they think that's going to be closer to about $741,000 or within that range. But a guaranteed annual savings of energy of about $75,000. I keep hitting the wrong button. I apologize. So the bus charging, this is a graph to show you, to represent what's happening right now. So the yellow shows what happens at the bus yard now. You can see that there's some large spikes during the morning time and in the afternoon, and that's obviously when we bring the buses in after our first round, and then when we plug them in at the end of the day, again, you can see how those skyrocket. We have an opportunity to test this out, but the theory is that we can change the programming on the chargers. We can set up time frames for each of these buses to be charged, and then we can push a lot of that to be over the nighttime, which is a lower rate, and still do the same amount of driving that we need to do. But so the yellow represents the spikes that we see in the morning and then in the afternoon, and then the blue represents how we would even that out and decrease our overall kilowatt usage, which would lower our monthly rate dramatically by 77 kilowatts. Again, the proposed bus charging, there's going to be some testing there and things, but they've got a very good plan set out for us to do that and to work with transportation to ensure that the buses are working appropriately, that we can drain the batteries enough to then bring them back and make sure that it will work during the school year. And then obviously working with transportation, who is also part of auxiliary services. And then the last part that I mentioned is a opportunity to do some sustainability coaching and training with students. This would be put on by McKinstry, where they would have industry experts coming and teaching at different facilities, along with Greg and others in our sustainability department, to show the kids what it means to be sustainable, the efforts that we're doing, that they'll have opportunities to show them the equipment that we use, not necessarily taking them up on top of buildings, but showing them what what we do to make the buildings more sustainable. The value of this is about $82,000. This would be a trial, something that we'd work with it's called the SEAL team, our sustainability and energy groups, working together. There would be somewhat of a application process that we would test this with 4 schools next year, but they would have basically quarterly trainings on this. And there's a lot of exciting different opportunities to do here. It could be talking about the solar side of it. It could be talking about the water efforts, the weatherization, air quality. Thank you, Craig. But that's the last leg of what we're recommending in this. As I mentioned, there's 2 different variables. I wanted to give you guys, I say best and worst. These guys are much smarter. The high potential versus the low potential of interest rate costs of what it would do. But based on this just over $7 million investment, we would be seeing, with a high interest rate and low estimated escalation rates of the utilities, it would be a finance term payoff of about 23.2 years. On the low interest rate side, we'd be looking at just under 20 years for that. If you notice number 4 on there, there's phase 1 IRA contributions. I mentioned that we're looking at well over $1 million return. There's a lot of different opportunities that money could be used for, but again, that could potentially be something that could be put towards this to pay it off sooner. And then obviously that number 3 on the Inflation Reduction Act. Several of our schools are in areas that they qualify for a higher percentage payoff. 5 of our schools could potentially meet that for a 34% reduction direct pay back to us, and 3 at the 25.5%. But worst case scenario again is all 8 schools would get the 25.5% IRA direct pay rebate. There's a lot of other levers on those formulas that I just showed you, but basically there's opportunities to do a 20-year term, a 15-year term, a 10-year term. That all depends on the comfortability and financing, and that's Alan's realm. Again, somebody much smarter than me. With the air sealing cost reduction, there's that savings that could potentially then be turned around and put back into the TELP as well. And then phase one payoff savings transfer. So the current TELP that you guys approved was that we're paying that off and we're seeing a reduction in our utilities of just over $1.2 million currently. And that could, once that TELP's paid off, that money could potentially be put into this to pay this one off faster if you so decided to do that. But overall, the TELP is at a point that we think it's appropriate to take the next step with your approval. This is just a look at fiscal year 26, which is, we're just in preliminary planning for that. But the biggest thing that I hope that you guys will take away from this is that phase one was successful. We're seeing a reduction in our costs. The TELP, we're seeing the amount. Well, once it's fully implemented, we see the return on the investment. The other thing is that these projects take a while from the time it's approved until the time it's actually implemented and functioning fully. So this is the plan for TELP. If a TELP was approved for fiscal year 2025, this is the preliminary plan of how this would be implemented. Put a star next to board approval tonight. I don't expect that, but just that we wanted to give you guys a timeline of what we've talked about for months now. Any questions or
Thank you,
comments?
Isaac, for bringing this to us, and to the team. Greg, always thank you. You've been, just working on this since its inception with the students and drafting the resolution with them and the board and board legal counsel. So thank you, and McKinstry, of course, thank you as well. I'm going to ask the first question, if that's okay, board, and more just a 101 question for our community and for folks that are watching. Alan, can you please let the community know just one more time what exactly a TELP loan is and how it works for our district and how it worked for phase one?
Right. So TELP stands for tax exempt lease purchase. In layman terms, it's a loan. And how it worked with phase one and how we're planning on phase two is, so what's great about McKinstry is they guarantee that the savings will cover the costs. And if it doesn't, then they pay us the difference. So they've got some skin in the game. So with phase one, we have a certain amount of annual payments on our loan that's guaranteed to be covered by the savings that we have in electricity. Now, what I want to say is important. You saw that cost avoidance piece. So you're not going to see, oh, look, our electricity went down by $1.2 million. Well, that's a piece of it, but another piece is, well, electricity rates went up, but we avoided a lot of that increase. So part of what we're looking for from the board tonight is, proceed with phase 2025 and proceed. We'd work with Alex Buxton, our financial advisor from Zion's Public Finance, to set up a TELP loan for the $7-point-something million, which will then again be paid off by the savings from this phase.
Thank you. Ashley, did I see you have your hand up?
Yes, you heard my loud cracking noise.
I wasn't going to call you out for that.
So Alan knows this because I sent him the email, but I had a constituent send me some information about public grants that are available for this type of work. So I was just hoping we could address for the public how we're pursuing creative ways to maximize some of the investment. But I have a second question, which is also how are we continuing to select sites for ongoing work? As I know, we're in the midst of discussions on building utilization, and other board members have also asked for a longer-term facilities plan in the future. So how are we thinking about buildings in context of the whole as well? So the creative grant use and questions about buildings.
So as far as the grants, Alan shared that information with us. I believe Greg had a lot of that already, but thank you for sharing. We have reached out there. We're always looking for opportunities to get grants for these types of projects. My understanding
That particular one?
it's not out
Not
yet.
out, right, and it's not a grant, it's an opportunity to borrow money at a particular rate,
Okay.
which is not determined, so it's monies that are going to individual organizations to shepherd those loans. So we're in touch with the folks who could potentially arrange to give us a low-cost loan, but I don't know if they're gonna guarantee.
So, and as far as the response to the rest of your question, we have been working on a facilities plan. We actually have been working with McKinstry as well on another side that we are doing an inventory of all of our equipment on every facility. That we're at about the third of the way through that right now, putting that into our software system that will help us manage what the work orders are, when the replacements are of all of the actual mechanical equipment and plumbing and electrical in the buildings. And then is also, I think the one thing that I think we've done really well at is we've been coordinating with our construction and facilities maintenance with McKinstry on identifying, we have, if we just barely put if we put a roof on a building 10 years ago, we obviously have some life left in that building. So it's not appropriate to say, okay, let's put the solar on now, or to re-roof and then put solar on to make sure that it doesn't leak. So we've identified we've identified the roof ages and other locations on properties that are most appropriate to put these, that will get the best bang for our buck on both sides of that.
See, you don't say that you're not smart, because
Yeah.
obviously you know a lot of things that none of us know. So,
I
thank
hope
you.
I'm not implying that I'm not smart. These guys are very smart.
That's several times.
And Greg,
not true.
Before you answer, do you mind speaking into the mic so the folks at home can hear you?
Greg.
I'm not trying to tell you to not talk, just to speak into the mic. Thanks, Greg.
Sure. Just wanted to address Ashley's question again. We are expecting over $1 million from the phase one from the solar. That's part of monies that have recently become available. And we are expecting close to $2 million for this phase to come from. So these are grants we are taking advantage of.
That's great. Thank you.
So awesome.
Christy?
So isn't this the best part of student engagement?
Absolutely.
I think this is the best part of student engagement. So Isaac, and to your team, thank you so much for the great work that you're doing. You know, these students had a vision. They came, can we use pester? They did really good pestering with us, but they also laid out such a great plan. And we were open to having their voices at a table, you know, and to talk about what that looked like. So for me, this is just amazing. I just wanted to highlight, because you kind of went over it really quickly, but I think this Power ED student and staff engagement piece is awesome.
Yep.
I mean, to be able to now, when you look at the kids that came and spoke to us, I think 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago, now a whole generation of kids at West High and Highland and East don't even know who those kids were, you know, that came and started this initiative with us. And so now to say, no, come in, we want to tell you about sustainability. I love this. And that the program value is $82,000, that's what you've identified. It's like, write a check, Alan. You know, I mean, it's just the coolest thing ever. So thank you for coming and providing such great information, but yet a celebration too of where we're headed. So thank you to the four of you and the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Brian?
Well, I was just going to echo that Power Ed piece. I think that it's really great that you have in-class STEM career conversations. And I mean, again, I'm thinking about the classroom and the in-person engagements and all of those things. One question that I did have, it was, I think in the previous slide, is the bus slide? Yeah, okay. So it sounds like during the summer, that's when you can test the buses without the children on them or whatever, and identify any performance issues. Are we having problems with the buses? I guess I have heard that, some of the buses are constantly being repaired. Where are we on our buses?
So we have had several challenges with some of the electric buses. It's a new technology.
Right.
I mean, it's not brand new technology, but it's in a larger form. Obviously, trying to fit it from a car to a bus takes a lot. We've had several meetings with the manufacturer and the engineering groups that design those. I feel like we've gotten a really good response from that, but we still have those challenges that we're working on. If you remember, a few months ago, we did put in a purchase request for 4 clean diesel buses rather than electrical, because we wanted to address those before we invested further in that. On the slide that showed the transportation, it did show that as of right now, by putting the solar panels on there, we'd be covering 118% of the use of that building right now. But that's with the intent that we'll be adding more chargers in the future. Now, that may change a little bit. There are other technologies, but we're doing everything we can to make sure that they work and that we're doing it in a safe manner for the students. There's nothing more than that. I mean, our priority is their safety first. And I'm not saying that the buses aren't unsafe, but we just want to make sure that they're reliable and that we can get the students to and from where they need to be without problems.
Yes, I remember the conversation and the 4, buses that, and I guess in my mind I'm kind of thinking maybe they need a couple more years to work out some of the bus kinks or whatever with electric. I'm not saying our buses, but with the development of buses before we make.
Yeah, not to bore you with the details of it, but they have found several issues. One of those was that the system itself was manufactured by one company and then moved to the manufacturer of the buses, and those being pre-made put some tensions on some of the relays and other connectors that have caused some of the issues. They've fixed most of those at this point. And now it's just testing to make sure that it's a complete fix. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Board Member Sika or Bade or Williams, do you have anything that you want to add to the discussion? Board Member Bade, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think the last thing I'd add is, one, just the echo of the thank you. It's been really fun. Christy and I, again, with these resolutions, have had the opportunity to see these grow from when they were first proposed to when they were first supported and voted on by the board to now. And the progress is really, really cool to see. And I love where we're at with this, and love that this was student-driven and student-focused and remains so in the work that we're doing. I just want to see more green bluebirds. I know that sounds really strange, but on these electric buses, the bluebird logo is green, and I always thought that was really fun. But nonetheless, I think that ends the discussion. Is there a motion to move this to the action agenda?
I move that we place Sustainability Phase 2025 on the action agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any additional discussion as we move this to action? None. We'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Excellent. That motion passes, and we will revisit this on the action agenda, which is now, which is really cool. So we will move there. The first item on our action agenda is the approval of the 2024-2025 annual budget. More specifically, as I mentioned, there are 3 elements to that budget. A, which is the 23-24 revised budget, B, the 24-25 annual budget, and C, the 24-25 proposed tax rate.
And I have a written motion if somebody wants to borrow it.
Okay.
I'll borrow it.
I can.
Or you could hand it to Jenny. She's right there.
Yeah.
Got you. Oh, no, that's long.
Jenny, you too. Oh, no, that's long. I got to read it? Yes.
Just this part.
Read it.
I recommend that the board approve the following motion, that the Board of Education approves the revised budget for the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 as it has been presented to the board. The board also approves the original budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025 as it has been presented to the board. The board approved the adoption of the certified tax rate for the 2024 tax year. In addition, the board authorizes the business administrator to make any budget adjustments necessary to reflect funds received from the final approved tax rate.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
We got a motion and a second. And Jenny, you got to stop hitting your knee on that table.
Jenny,
Okay.
I'm the same way. I've got one.
All right, is there any further discussion now that we have a motion on the table? Seeing none, we've been through a lengthy process over a course of a few different meetings, and of course, our Finance Committee, I want to thank you for this as well. But seeing that there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and start with a roll call vote, starting with Board Member Bade.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, just looking for your vote on the motion to approve the elements of our 24-25 annual budget.
Yes, Mohammed Baid, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
And Nate Salazar, yes, that passes. Congratulations, Board, and congratulations, Alan and community. Thank you for all the efforts you and your team, Finance Committee, as I mentioned, have put into this. It really is, it's, statutorily one of our big responsibilities. So thank you, Board, for your engagement with this process. The second item on our action agenda is the sustainability phase 2025. I would entertain a motion as well.
I move that we approve Sustainability Phase 2025 as presented by Auxiliary Services Director Isaac Astle.
Second.
Motion
Second.
and a second on the table. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Jensen.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Greg, Isaac, McKinstry, thank you so much, and congratulations too. We're looking forward to the next phase. Really appreciate your efforts. And thank you to the students. I'm sure you're watching while you're in college somewhere.
We're positive.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's
Thank you.
great.
All
That's
right,
great.
the time has come, Superintendent, for a report if you have one.
I do have a couple of things. We just ended the school year, and I appreciate you as board members coming to the graduation events. We had 4 of those. On Friday, we had 2 on Thursday evening, and then still have the Skyview Academy one ahead. But just really impressed and appreciated you as board members contributing to those meetings with your comments and with your personalities and your take on the district. And I just thought those were great. Yeah, Ashley
was
had
that?
people clapping, and
Yeah.
Ashley
Had to be
had
there.
an interactive speech with the
Oh, you
audience.
had an interactive.
Yeah, she did.
Participation.
Yes, it was. It was pretty impressive. In fact, they got it on the first take, Ashley. But thank you, and thank you to the teams in the high schools that put so much effort in to make that work. They really structure those well, and there is a lot that goes in for the graduation experience for students. So our thanks for that. I want to give some shout outs to teachers, and Tiffany, you're going to help me with a couple of these because I don't know all of them. One is that we continue with the high bar for teachers around national board certification, which is just a great deal of work and has the expectation that teachers demonstrate skills in instruction, and that we have the most nationally board certified teachers in the state, and we're not the largest district, and that we have this year another 8 who have completed their candidacy applications, which hurrah for them for all that work in doing that, and 7 who are nearly completed with their applications, and others who are beginning in the process. So thank you to teachers for taking that on. That is a quest that is not demanded of the district, by the district. And these are teachers who want to refine their craft as instructors, and to put in that kind of work to get that sort of certification is very impressive and serves our kids well. So thank you for that. Another group, 200 elementary teachers, over 100 secondary teachers engaged today. And tomorrow, I believe, Tiffany? For secondary in professional development around professional learning communities. So they finished school last week and they're already back learning on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week around professional learning communities, which is the opportunity for them to get better at working together and collaborating to improve student outcomes. I mean, professional learning communities have proven to make a difference in how kids do. So hurrah to educators for that. Tiffany, there are two things here that I need a little more information on. Elementary School Social Studies Institute.
Our social studies teachers, we have a group of 20 that will be coming together for a 4-day institute next week. And they will be working with authentic sources and the Utah Core Standards for Social Studies to put together inquiry units so that students are asking questions and answering them with authentic, real sources, learning how to communicate that learning and put it out in writing. This is just a great way for us to help meet the state standards. We tie it into other learning that they're doing, and we are receiving some national attention for some of these inquiry units across the board, both our elementary and secondary, as they're published as open education resources for the C3 teacher inquiry site. So just great work, deep thinking, great conversations, great curriculum design, just really thinking about how we're making sure elementary school students are accessing all of the parts of the curriculum that they should be learning.
And one more, the Ed Camp work around technology integration.
So as you know, we're a one-to-one district, and all of our teachers, we're working to make sure that they're able to integrate technology in successful and productive ways for student learning. So our digital teaching and learning department is putting on an Ed Camp. This is a teacher-directed workshop, so they'll come in for several hours. They'll kind of choose the topics that are of interest to them. And one of the things that we're modeling and what's the opposite of supporting when you put it out there? We're modeling and putting it out there that they will be looking at how are we personalizing learning and how technology will help us personalize learning for students.
Thank you, Tiffany. You add much more information to that than I could. Just one more thing to mention to you. I wanted to let you know, as board members, when I started almost a year ago, I'm not quite ready to do a retrospective yet, but almost a year ago, I shared that my interest was in implementing what had already been decided in terms of our strategic plan and the board priorities, because they are right and in the best direction, and I think what's put together in our strategic plan is important. Implementation is always the hard part. I was thinking, any of us who have tried to diet have found implementation to be the real challenge, right? It is the great challenge of any policy task, and I spent time in policy, but really the difficulty is the implementation of any kind of aspiration that we have. With those aspirations, I really do think doubling down on implementation gets us the best results. We have, in the last weeks, had the benefit of some consultants who are working to help us create implementation plans for these priorities. Some philanthropists who have kids in our schools have supported some work with MGT Consulting, which is a larger consulting organization nationally, but does a lot of education work. They've come in and worked with our senior team on cabinet and spoken with them, interviewed them about the district and what's happening, done a quick analysis of what they see as kind of strengths and challenges in the district, and then pulled together some data and some pictures of that data that I find in telling a story is really useful. I want to bring some slides to the board meeting to just show particularly the remarkable growth our district gets. When I talked in the beginning about that we want to lead in growth and equity and opportunity and accomplishment, I hadn't realized that we were already leading in growth. This district deserves much more credit for its teaching and what our teachers are doing with students each year in terms of student growth. We outperform, I believe, almost every district in the state in measures of growth, and certainly when you take into account the number of low-income students in our district, it is just beyond. And I want to be able to show you some of that data that's been pictured by the consultants. The other work they've done that's important is help us just sort of encapsulate everything that's happening in the district and prioritize, because half the battle is not trying to do everything. And so narrowing down on some priorities around literacy, on creating pathways, on defining some operational supports that will help us be more effective as a district internally. And then just wanted to let you know this is happening. We've worked with them for about 8 weeks. We've got 12 weeks scheduled. We may look at some implementation support in the future, but that's to be decided. I would love if you as board members are able to carve out some time to see some of the original presentation, and then again want to bring that publicly to the community to just let them know. So happy over time, if you want, pull me aside, I'll answer some questions on that, but just wanted to share that with you about what we're doing internally to get better as a district and refine our work as we're moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Grant.
You're welcome.
All right. I know I can't start at this end of the table, so I'm looking at the screen, Mohammed, and we'll start with board member reports with you if you have one.
Hello, everyone. So I'll make it brief. First of all, congratulations to all of our students who graduated and completed a very successful year. Usually as a board, we deal with a lot of stresses, but then when you stand there and you see these kids, goofing around or who knows what, but just seeing them graduating is such an amazing, it reminds me personally of why I'm here. Also, I want to extend a sincere thanks to all of the teachers, staff, and everyone that was involved in the operation of our schools that are closing. I can only imagine, how dear, is that school to you, because especially if you've been there for so long. And just know, as our district, we are focused on moving forward and making sure that the transition continue to go well. But I am so grateful. My kids went through one of those schools, and words are not enough. My kid came home crying, and he was not just crying, but sobbing. That was the last time he's going to be able to learn anything in that school. But I had to comfort him, as a father, and explain to him as much as we could. And to the teachers, I appreciate you, and I know you will do well at whichever school you are placed in. And to my fellow board members, I appreciate you as well. Every day I learn something new from each of you, and also our superintendent and business administrator, and of course, the rest of the cabinet. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed.
And also, pardon the background noise earlier. So I think I might have fell asleep on one of the keyboards. No, just kidding. Nope, take that.
That's excellent. Thank you, Mohammed. I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you.
Board Member Sika, any reports you'd like to make?
No.
Okay. Vice President Williams.
Yeah, a couple of really quick things. One, I was a little bummed out that I missed most of the, or not most, all of the graduation festivities, but I am excited to give a speech at the Skyview Academy graduation on Monday, so I get a little piece of that graduation festivities. The other piece I was going to mention is I had the opportunity on the 22nd of May to attend the senior showcase at SLCSD Rose Park. The senior projects that those students put together are absolutely fantastic. It's, I think, third time attending that event. It's my favorite event at SLCSD Rose Park every year, so I'm glad I got to be able to attend that. And I felt like there was, the other thing, I'm just looking forward to our pre-delegate and delegate assembly this weekend. So, thanks, Bryce.
You have that mic.
I want my old spot back. I shared this already with Brian, but I did ask Bryce to be an alternate for me at the delegate assembly as I had a conflict come up on that date, so I wanted to let everybody know. I did share a draft of a statement on SJR 10 and can continue to work on editing that using feedback from board members. I would also reiterate that it was great to accept the graduating class from West High, and I especially love that our graduations are really student-centered and reflect our communities, which I think is unique among the state. The diverse expression of the backgrounds, interests, and experiences of all of the students was wonderful to hear. There have been no additional meetings for my respective committees, so I don't have a lot of updates, but I do want to wish everyone a wonderful Pride Month filled with celebrations.
Yeah, Board Member Jensen.
Ashley already covered part of that, and that was the pre-delegate and then the delegate assembly, and I appreciate, Bryce, your willingness to step into that. And any feedback that you can give us on that draft, I'm hoping that we can wordsmith it to meet everyone's expectations so that I believe President Salazar will be presenting that at the delegate assembly for us as our president. But that would be helpful to get that so that it reflects everyone's input. Then in the last report that I gave, I told you that I was excited to go to the 2024 Salt Lake City School District Title VI American Indian Education Senior Honoring Ceremony, and I was there with Superintendent Grant and Board President Salazar, and to me that was just a really wonderful evening to see those Native Americans and the accomplishments that they have made. And for me it was especially poignant because there was a student there that I worked with as a third grade teacher, and it's always wonderful to see the success that they're experiencing and what their future looks like. So that's my, and I will also tell you that I will have a report next time from the policy committee. We'll be meeting next week.
Thank you, Brian. Christy?
So I agree with everybody that sometimes it's just the small things at graduation, that really stand out for me. And I think that I think it was just Nate and I. We were standing in the tunnel, and there were, I think, 4 students from Highland that just broke out in song, and they started to sing the Star Spangled Banner. And Nate and I were like looking at them, and they were amazing, weren't they? I mean, they sounded absolutely beautiful. And I turned to Principal Chatterton and I said, "Are they singing?" He goes, "Oh no, they're just singing." And for them to choose that song, the Star Spangled Banner, right before graduation, I thought was just so sweet. But I also think that the other small thing that really hit me was the teacher tunnel that they created as the kids came off the graduation, and went through and high-fived their teachers or hugged them. I mean, you just know that the teacher has such an impact, on our kids. And listening to that list tonight, Nate, there were so many of those teachers that taught my children. And I just thought, oh my gosh, they're leaving our district. But they impacted my kids' lives, just the same way that you talked about that. So what I wanted to do is just to tell you that you all know that I'm such a patriotic nut. My house right now looks like a flag. It's just like red, white, and blue. But my father is a veteran, and when he passed away, we buried him in the Fort Douglas Cemetery. And if you've never been up to the Fort Douglas Cemetery, you should go. It's one of the most beautiful cemeteries. And so we were there, with and it's so interesting because my son Ryan was just barely a year old when my dad passed away. And of course, my granddaughter never knew my dad, but they go every year with me, to put flowers on his grave. And so one of the things that I think is one of the holidays that kind of gets overlooked is Flag Day. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about June 14th. And if you come by my house, you'll know which one it is because there's too much red, white, and blue. So on June 14th, 1777, John Adams introduced a resolution before Congress mandating a United States flag. Stating that flag of the 13 United States should have 13 stripes, alternating red and white, and that the Union be 13 stars white on a blue field representing a new constellation. In that same date, in 1922, Warren G. Harding became the first United States president to broadcast a message over the radio, and that event was the dedication of the Francis Scott Key Memorial in Baltimore.
That's awesome. Thanks, Christy. I also have a board member report as well, specifically on the end of school and graduations, and a huge shout out and thanks again to our teachers, to our administrators, on another successful year. All of the teams that support students within schools here at the DO, at our auxiliary services. The one element that I think is so cool about our district, Dr. Grant and my board colleagues and everybody listening that's here tonight, is that all of the folks that I mentioned who fit within those realms of service in our school district are there for students, and it shows. And so it's just really cool to see another school year, kind of come and come to an end as well. Grant, I want to thank you too on your first school year with Salt Lake City School District. Thank you for that. And graduation time definitely brought that realization to me. I think in one of the graduations, I was like, "Dang, congrats on your first school year." And Christy, it was your last graduation.
It was.
And so it was quite a contrast of kind of where our board is at, and I love where our board is at. With our partnerships with our admin, with our teachers, with everybody. I think we're in a really solid place. And Christy, I want to thank you as equally as I thank Dr. Grant on our first for your 20th. It really is a big deal that you've invested your time and your heart into this school district. So thank you for that. I think the personal element of graduation for me, similar to what Board Member Bade said, is that it really is just the reflection on all the hard work that goes in to not just a single school year, but 12 or 13 school years for our students that are walking across that stage. The personal element that was cool for me is I had the chance to accept the graduating class at East, and I talked to Brian about this earlier about how I was like, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to speak at East because it's my 20th reunion from East High School, and I mentioned in my speech that East saved my life, and I mentioned at this board table plenty of times that I was not your traditional student, and that I barely graduated, and to address a graduating class and thinking about where I was 20 years ago and thinking about where I am now, it really is true that East High saved my life and gave me a purpose and a direction that probably wouldn't have been as awesome as where my life is today, where it's ended up. So thank you to East, all of the teachers that I had, and principals and counselors, and Dr. Razan for making that investment in me and all the students before and after me as well. Please respond to any feedback that we have on the delegate assembly SJR 10 opposition draft that I sent out earlier today. I've gotten some feedback from a few of you. and we'll be working with Brian and Ashley to make sure that we have a really solid final draft that's collective and representative of all of us as we prepare for the delegate assembly. I think that rounds out my report there, everybody. And with that, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to watch Arthur's TikTok?
Good night, everyone.
The pictures?
What do you, Lakina?
Arthur's TikTok, you want to see it?
Yes.